As a homeowner, you were limited to a 30% investment tax credit, but from a business perspective that could lease the system, you could enable up to a 50% and sometimes 60% investment tax credit for the same project, obviously in certain qualifying areas.
Taking away 30% all at once probably just will drive up electricity prices, and we'll still all have our jobs because they need the solar.
We're doing 90,000 transactions across the nation each quarter right now, not all in Connecticut, but like across the nation.
So how can people use GoodLeap?
Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast.
Today, our very special guest is Dan Lotano, and Dan is currently the Chief Operating Officer of GoodLeap, formerly the Chief Strategy Officer of GoodLeap. So Dan, it looks like you're moving up. How soon until you take over the world?
Yeah, world domination is certainly part of the plans, but you got to take these things one day at a time. So hopefully my boss isn't listening too closely to this, but maybe one day.
Well, he'll just be glad that he knew you when you're dominating the whole world, when you're on top, like world dictator, or whatever they're going to call it. We don't have one right now.
He's got a pretty good lock on that right now, so it might be hard to dislodge.
Okay, great. Well, all fun aside, or in fact, let's just have fun the whole time. We were going to talk about some things that just happened, and so some new guidance, and we're going to release this sooner than we usually do release a podcast. And so before we do that, how about just tell us what you're going to talk, some new guidance from the Treasury, right?
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of changes coming through Washington this summer with the new administration and outlook on how they wanted to handle things as it related to the Inflation Reduction Act and where they want to see the energy solutions of the country go forward. We were obviously a big part in monitoring that and seeing how it would develop because it affects our business, it affects our industry, and we're clearly an interested party of how this shakes out. So that bill was passed earlier this year. In early July, there was an executive order to have the Treasury Department update some rules and regulations and clarify a couple things in that bill. That just came out in the last hour or so. And I think the punchline is it provides the glide path that everyone across the industry, not just the solar industry, but just overall energy was looking for from an incentive ramp down and in order to get to a more sustainable future in the past. So I think there was a fear these things could be shut off quite quickly. It seems like the administration made the appropriate path to provide a glide path so that this, along with all the other energy sources that need to be developed, can be part of our overall solution as a country.
So that sounds like you're saying that it's kind of good news, or it was expected to be worse. But before we dive into this guidance and let's just kind of put a time to it, we're right here. We're the middle of August. You just got some breaking news. We're going to try to release this podcast as soon as possible. But you can also just tell us right now, too, what GoodLeap does. So you work for GoodLeap. You're in Florida. And what does GoodLeap do?
Right. So GoodLeap is a technology platform, and we are looking to both enable and drive adoption of all things sustainability in the home. Think about it as that platform for the trades or homeowners who really want to advance their goals around sustainability in their house and whatnot. And how we do that is through a big connection of the ecosystem. Think about equipment manufacturers and contractors and financiers and homeowners and utilities. How can we all bring them together in one platform so that we can really drive cost efficiencies and make it a faster, quicker process in order to adopt their goals? And there's a lot of companies out there that do varying components of that. They'll do system design, or they'll do payments, or they'll do financing, or they'll do energy management. What I really love about our platform is it's a one-stop shop, right? So from the origination of the deal all the way through what's hopefully a very happy 25-year relationship with that customer, we're that platform that can be the go-to for them. And that's where I think our big competitive advantage lies, and something I'm really excited about the team continuing to build on.
So that's great. And I think everybody should especially go to use GoodLeap for everything that they do. But in the meantime, I wanted to take a leap to what's going on right now in the industry, and then we could leap back to what GoodLeap is doing. So what's going on with this Treasury guidance that just came out an hour ago? let's go into some details. Like, how does it affect
Sure.
the solar business?
As it currently stands, there are various incentives associated with the deployment of solar and batteries and a number of other renewable type generation activity. And earlier this year, right, when the One Big Beautiful Bill was passed, there was a lot of concern going in that some of those incentives may be diminished or taken away altogether sooner than what the former legislation would allow. And how would the industry adapt to that? And so, as you can imagine, there was lots of conversations about how and why these subsidies or incentives should change over time. But I said, ultimately, what I think the government came out with, which was a pretty fantastic outcome, was a glide path for all, right? Don't do something sudden and knee jerk that's going to cause a lot of reaction and put a lot of capital at risk, but let's give that proper visibility so that businesses can adjust. And ultimately, I think it's a great outcome because it furthers domestic manufacturing, right? A more US-based approach, which is great for jobs and national security, but it also allows the businesses to evolve. So these incentives have been around for quite a period of time. I think it's fair to say some people have grown to be a little bit dependent on those. And in order to really evolve the business and the industry to get to a more lower cost structure that will drive even further adoption, I think is a great step in the direction, right? Provide the glide path, give the businesses some time to move, and ultimately come up with a lower cost structure, which will drive the adoption that we want across the world, or the nation, I should say.
And so you don't happen to be a pilot, do you?
A pilot? No.
Yeah, because when you're talking about glide paths, so when you're flying an airplane and you're coming in for a landing, if you're coming in too low, there's too many red lights. If you're coming in too high, there's too many green lights and you have to go around. And if you're coming in on the right glide path, then you got just the right amount of red and green lights. And so for this glide path, I kind of like using that terminology too. So one of the things that I've noticed with the solar industry, which they call the solar coaster, is there's just a lot of abrupt changes. And most of those abrupt changes have gone up, like when they just go like, all of a sudden, here's a 30% tax credit, or, like just in the history of things, there's been like these incentives and rebates and stuff, and they go up. And so then when they pull them out quick, then it's the drop down. But it's still better than where we would have been without those incentives in the first place. And I like having a smooth glide path. And that's one of the things that I've been kind of advocating for, is to have gradual incentive changes. So it's good for business. It makes people plan on things. It makes people not go bankrupt. And when things do drop down suddenly like that, it might be, it turns out to be survival of the fittest. And then the people with the best survival skills, like having NABCEP certifications or having a really good business plan and things like that, they're going to be the ones that survive. And then in the end, they're going to be dominating world domination, like what we were just talking about. So those are always good things to have. And so some of this Treasury guidance, I guess, like how does it smooth things out so the whole industry doesn't have to drop out? And I know there's like so many different things. There's solar, there's storage, there's manufacturing. Is this going to keep the manufacturing facilities here in the United States? Which has been a big concern because there's a lot of people spending billions of dollars building solar factories and battery factories and things like that. And they want to keep making things in the United States. And they were getting more in the way of tax credits, like you can add to your tax credit and all that kind of stuff. And then there's different things where like part of the solar industry drops off at the end of the year. So there's like the residential ITC investment tax credit, 30%. In general, is supposed to drop off December 31st. And if it's financed by a bank, then you get a little bit longer, or it's a lease or a PPA and things like that. So do you have any details on like why it's good? I know you're just learning about it in the last hour.
I think why it's good is it preserves that runway. So, and there's a lot of different, as you just outlined, there's a lot of different factors and a lot of complexity and different situations that you need to address. So, first and foremost, on the domestic manufacturing side, that was one of the big fears, right? Companies have come here, they've onshored a lot of their activity. They are very supportive of the goals of where we're trying to go around that front. But a lot of that was dependent or assuming that there were several years of additional incentives that would help really drive the volume that they would need in order to justify those investments. And so with what's come out of the Treasury Department today, I think everyone can take a little bit of a exhale and say, yep, yeah, we do have those few years where these subsidies are still going to exist. They are going to go away, and everyone needs to prepare for that world when it does. But it isn't that immediate pull of the rug situation that would compromise hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of capital, which is not something that anyone wants to see. And then to your point, from a homeowner's perspective, hey, what kind of system am I going to get? Under the homeowner credit or 25D rules, those are still expiring at the end of the year. So if you want to own your own system, you have until the end of the year to purchase that in cash or loan and still qualify for the tax credits. Otherwise, it's not going away entirely. There's the other alternative of doing a purchase power agreement or a lease with a bank or someone like us that is more of a subscription model. I know there's varying energy as a service type rules. I mean, you can think about it different way, or I should say programs, but it's effectively like buying the energy at a lower rate than you would from the utility or whoever your provider is over a same 25-year period. And then those still qualify for the incentives for the next couple of years. So the industry has certainly shifted towards that model over the last, call it 12 to 18 months. And I think you're going to see this kind of stampede over the next 4 or 5 months for homeowners that want to qualify for the loan and get their systems done under 25D work. But then it's predominantly going to be a purchase power agreement or lease model for the next few years.
Do you have any idea about what percentage of people with residential systems are currently, before the big bad bill or whatever BBB stands for, before that came out?
Big beautiful bill. Beautiful bill.
Yeah, I don't like to give it that much credit. So before that happened, what percentage of people were actually doing the 25D thing where they weren't running the tax credits through some other organization? Do you have any idea? Is it quarter, third, half, something?
Yeah, since the original Inflation Reduction Act under the Biden administration was passed, the market had shifted to that PPA and lease. So it was probably 75, 80% of that PPA lease variety, and the other remaining portion was either cash or the loan. And that was driven by, in large part, because if the equipment was manufactured domestically, and if it was in certain areas that had coal plant closures, right, or certain income levels below national standards, there was additional incentives available for that tax credit as well. So as a homeowner, you were limited to a 30% investment tax credit, but from a business perspective that could lease the system, you could enable up to a 50% and sometimes 60% investment tax credit for the same project, obviously in certain qualifying areas.
Yeah, I always thought it's interesting too that this country is about hundreds of millions of people, and the people don't qualify anymore, or they won't unless they go through a corporation. So power to the corporation, corporate rights, That's why I have a corporation, so I get a vote.
Yeah, well, I mean, just this last couple of minutes of conversation, right? It's a dizzying array of different options and different tax rules and what year and what administration. So from a homeowner's perspective, I mean, I'm a homeowner, right? It's really hard to keep, I'm in the industry, so I know more than most, but it's really hard to keep track of all these things. And if you think about a customer first approach in education, what I like about what GoodLeap does is first and foremost, we're indifferent. So our idea is to educate the customer, avail them of all the different financing options for this, in this example in particular, that we can make available, and let the customer choose. But we want to be able to be smart about, hey, if you choose this option, here's what it means, here's the implications. If you choose this option, here's the different alternatives or things that you got to think through, and let them make that choice, but then be knowledgeable in all these areas so that we can give them the best information possible. Right, because I think it's still very confusing. I want to go solar, I want to add a battery for a lot of good reasons, but how I do that can be, a pretty arduous process.
I think that was a pretty important number as far as keeping things a little bit optimistic too, where you told me about 25% of people, before the BBB, we'll call it, the big BBB, whatever, make up whatever you want B to stand for, that middle B. And so 25% or the 25D people, as it's oftentimes called, the people that are like pretty much own their own system without somebody else involved in taking the tax credits and depreciation and stuff like that. So pretty much all that people have to do is either get it installed by the end of the year. And is that like, how would you say too, like, do they need to get it installed? Do they need the interconnection agreement? Do you know where they draw the line for that?
Yeah, our understanding is that they need to be installed. Right.
Installed,
So
okay.
yeah, so as long as all the equipment's installed and ready to go,
Like permit
clearly,
signed off? Is that?
yeah, clearly utilities have their own timelines, and how they do the interconnection. So as to not penalize the homeowner, it was, hey, is the construction of this asset complete? Then it will qualify, and then hopefully the utilities will see their way to connect them as soon as possible. But that's not going to be something that trips them up because it is out of the homeowner's control.
Okay. All right. And so one of the things that I was wondering too with that is, what if somebody like me had a corporation and then I just put it under my corporation's name and still put it on my house? I wonder if that would qualify for
I am not a
25D.
tax lawyer, so
Or like not qualify for 25D. Yeah. Maybe that would work too. Everybody will be out there starting their own corporation now.
I have heard of instances of people, positing that if that's an option. Again, I'm not a tax lawyer, we can't give tax advice, but it seems like that could be, from what I've heard, more of a challenging path at the end of the day.
Yep. And if you were a tax lawyer, I'd have to pay you $500 to tell me.
That's right. Yeah, that maybe. Well,
Probably more than that, yeah.
they're more than that. I was like, man, if I can get our tax lawyers for $500 an hour, then that would be a good outcome.
Yeah.
But one of the things around a corporation, if you will, owned system is, again, and as we think about where this industry is going and advancements, and I know, we were talking about it at the outset of the call, this concept of virtual power plants and energy management and aggregating all of these systems to participate in the grid and help drive resiliencies there and help utilities. When it's a homeowner owned system by itself, right? Like, there are limited options on what you can do and how you can participate. One of the advantages that I love about our platform and what we can do for homeowners is, because we have all these connections with equipment manufacturers and because we can aggregate all these systems and we have partnerships with utilities, we can drive meaningful value. One, we can educate the customers on what's available and how they can optimize their assets, but we can also drive meaningful value for the grid that returns compensation to those homeowners at levels they wouldn't otherwise be able to do on their own. Right. And that's another huge advantage of something like our platform, and where I'm really excited the whole battery industry is going, and why I'm excited we have the glide path that the administration provided.
Great. And so another thing I just thought I should point out too is, like, it's not this end of the world thing at December 31st. So the only difference would be, like, people aren't going to be getting that tax credit if they own their own system. So what they could do is they could go through somebody else, like, I guess, GoodLeap, or, that somebody else owns the system, which most people are doing anyway. Like 75% of residential systems, let's just say, like on residential roofs, are not owned by the people in there. They're doing a power purchase agreement, which is called a PPA also, or a lease, and that way you don't have to deal with that. And besides the other thing with just the 30% tax credit, there's another thing called depreciation. And there's other creative things that people could do too. And there's different ways, like you were saying, like domestic content and stuff that's, got some made in America content helps out, or friendly countries and things like that. Is that some of the things that you're talking about too with this, like, Treasury guidance? Like, when they talk about Treasury guidance, usually it just means that the U.S. Treasury has decided that this qualifies so you can get that tax credit. One thing or another. So it's not an end of the year cliff that, like, sometimes solar salespeople too try to make it all dramatic. Sign up now or it's over for the rest of your life, And then they're shooting themselves in the foot, because then when next year comes along, they're like, you told me that was the end, so I'm not going to do it now,
Yeah, it is really prior to the Inflation Reduction Act. That was, as you mentioned, the solar coaster and renewable energy more broadly. There was always a 1 or 2 year lease on life on those incentives. And so, yeah, you had this stop, start, going out of business sale, get your solar system now. That went away when we had the longer visibility from the Inflation Reduction Act, and now with the changes under the new administration, it's certainly, not the kind of evergreen incentive program that legislation provided, but it does still provide several years. So to your point, this is not a cliff per se in terms of the industry. What homeowners may qualify for may change, but I would also suspect there's going to be a lot of innovation from a financial perspective when it comes to what you can do around that. So, for example, you may get a lease through GoodLeap, but then you could also just get a normal loan, put it into your mortgage, get a HELOC, and prepay that lease with, your own financing so that you ultimately own the system at the end of the day, right? And that could be a way to both avail yourself of the incentives, but then also own the system at the end of the day that the homeowner may want to choose. So like anything else, necessity is the mother of innovation. And I think you're going to continue to see financial products evolve so that, again, first and foremost, the customer has their choice at the end of the day, which is really the most important part.
Yeah, if I can remember right too, I think it was something like 2006, 7, and 8, and they had the brand new ITC investment tax credit, 30%, and it kept expiring. And then at the end of the year, Congress is all fighting, and then just right at the end of the year, they renew it. And so there was just all these false cliffs and things like that. And so what I think is going to happen too is probably when the other tax credits that are not the 25D, but the tax credits that have to do with your system is owned by somebody else, by a corporation, then when those things are about to run out, same thing will happen, and maybe they'll call them the beautiful Trump tax credits, or something like that. And then Trump will be all like, oh, I love the sound of that, So maybe as an industry, we should talk about just naming the tax credits after Trump, and then we could get them back. Do you think that's a good idea?
They say about flattery, right? And everything, imitations. I think it's important for the country. Like the energy demands are continuing to surge. If you believe in the AI story, which I think most all of us do at this point, even my wife calls ChatGPT her best friend now, right? Like it's becoming this huge need. And as a country, we shouldn't discriminate on what an electron is an electron. And that's ultimately going to help power what's going to be the impacts around AI and its capabilities. So, a lot of these times, to your point, administrations set these things up so they cover their period. And then you always say the what comes next game. I think, and history suggests that maybe these get extended sometime in the future, maybe they don't. I will go back to what I said earlier, though. I do think it is helpful, just more broadly across the industry, and not just residential, but all renewables, that is, if you take away some of those incentives, it forces innovation, right? It forces people to figure out, how do we squeeze more out of this equipment? How do we lower our costs? Sometimes a little bit of that is necessary just to give that evolutionary prompting that I think is helpful. So you don't want to be living and dying on whether I get a 30% investment tax credit forever. I think it's a useful thing to have to help drive the adoption. But I would like to see the industry also evolve to the point where it's not necessary just because we've taken those next evolutionary steps to really dig in and figure out what we can become more efficient and drive the innovation that's necessary.
Yeah, I kind of think with taking away 30% all at once, probably just will drive up electricity prices, and we'll still all have our jobs because they need the solar. We got to win AI and all that kind of stuff, and we just don't have time to wait around to go backwards in time and start burning more fossil fuels, which we've been kind of transitioning away from, and solar and wind being the least expensive electricity out there, and they need it. All these tech people that need a lot of energy so they can compete. And there's just these timelines where it's like solar can be installed quick, natural gas, nuclear, coal, all that stuff takes a lot longer, 5, 10, maybe even 20 times longer in some cases.
If you look at the backlogs, which a lot of these big gas companies make from publicly available, and GE, Vernova, and things like that, it's the end of the decade before they can even make some of these gas turbines available, right? And nuclear, while it's clean and efficient, is an even bigger capital investment and certainly more risk associated with that and a longer timeline. So the good news is, again, just out of necessity, I think you're going to continue to see strong adoption of renewable energy and clean energy for the next few years. I think ultimately all these things are needed anyways, just because of the growth of where we see things going. But even if people wanted to, they can't put a gas plant in the ground tomorrow. Right. So if I'm Meta or I'm Google or I'm OpenAI and I need to run these things, like I don't have other choices today. I have to look at solar as an alternative to get these things going. And maybe later on into the 2030s, there are other options available, but it's going to require an all of the above strategy. And as you rightly point out, it's available today and it's cheap and it's fast.
Yeah, I'm even wondering too, if they kind of planned it all out, and then maybe the people that are like have a good in with the administration know that they're going to extend the tax credit, so then they know where to invest their money and make billions, so they can add to their billions.
That's never been done before. What are you talking about?
Yeah, those are the people that should have billions of more rights than the rest of everybody. And I always thought too, like with these incentives, that they need to taper them down, like 1% at a time instead of 30% all at once. And anytime you see something that grows fast, you see volatility. So like if you look at these stocks that are the biggest stocks in the world, there's been times where they went down 50% with no exceptions. It always happens.
Right.
And the fastest growing stock has probably had the fastest drops too. And you know, it's like if you bought Amazon or Microsoft or Apple early and you were like a chicken, you would have got rid of it because you wouldn't have waited for it to like mature and get real high, because they just go up and down and up and down, or you know, things like Bitcoin, all that kind of stuff. There's lots of volatility in these fast growing things. So
the coaster is not limited to solar.
Yeah,
any good technology, there's going to be ups and downs, there's going to be volatility. And it is the strong business models and those who innovate and evolve that are ultimately going to win, but you got to be able to stomach your way through it for sure.
Yeah, solar coaster just sounds better because it rhymes with roller. Like
it's nice. Yeah.
You know, I don't know if there's any other Olers out there. Like I can't even think of one, but you know, energy storage coaster, you know, like it just doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same ring.
Yeah.
I'm surprised nobody's trademarked that actually.
Yeah, probably. I'm sure somebody's probably doing it right now.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
So do you have any like examples or specifics? I know it just came out an hour ago and now you're on the podcast, and there's probably people sitting in the other room next to you that are like diving into the specifics a little bit more, but like exactly how does this help? Or is it too early?
Like I said, I don't know if it helps. Maybe it doesn't hurt is probably the better way to think about it. It clarifies that there are going to be these incentives for the next few years. Manufacturers don't have to worry about their capital investments drying out. People who already have projects in flight were afraid maybe there'd be retroactive changes that would take some of these away and disrupt, again, the capital they've already invested. So I think there's a general exhale in knowing that for the next few years, if people manages their businesses the way that they've outlined the rules, there's the path forward. And I think that's the takeaway at the end of the day. There's no rug pull event that seems to have occurred by this outcome. So businesses can start planning their purchases. They can start thinking about their hiring plans, and then they can start equipping themselves with, hey, as we think about all these energy transitions and how do we unlock value for customers, you know, what do we need to do to start going in that direction? And I'm really excited about the prospect of AI and what that's going to do for our industry to help bridge that gap, right? So as the tax credits wind down and potentially go away, one of the biggest areas where we can drive so much cost efficiency and improve the experience for everyone involved is just introducing AI more into these applications, right? So you can imagine a homeowner, they're on our GoodLeap app, they're getting notifications from us like, hey, we noticed that your AC unit or your solar is not performing at the level we expect. We can hook you up with a list of qualified and recommended contractors in your area. You can snap a couple photos of your home and we can help design what that new system could look like if it needs replacement, or what changes we need to make in order to fix it up so that it is performing at that level. Let us schedule for you. Let's get the equipment ordered through the manufacturer and drop site at your home. You tell us when, right? And getting all of that, what otherwise would be a step-by-step manual call, bunch of chasing down of people, scheduling time, like that can all be evaporated, right, through the use of AI. And now I can just talk to them like, hey, I need a new solar system. Can you give me quotes and have someone come out to my home next Tuesday? And that can all be arranged, right? So from a homeowner's perspective, from a contractor's perspective, and certainly what GoodLeap is introducing as part of our ecosystem is how can we make this process easier? How can we bring more technology? And how can we use AI to bring this together in a seamless way such that, again, when the tax credits go away, you won't need them because we've taken so much cost and time out of the system.
Okay, great. So how can people use GoodLeap? Like, are you marketing to installers? Are you marketing to people that are going to buy solar? Are you focusing on one particular part of the industry?
So we actually do little to no marketing. Our chief marketing officer would probably hate me saying that, right? Like we don't spend a lot of dollars there. Where we spend the vast majority of our efforts in building up technology is to enable the contractors, right? So first and foremost, let's make this process as simple and clean, as easy, and obviously in a risk-adjusted way, and a homeowner customer-facing way for the contractor. And then where we've seen this evolution occur, which like I said, I'm really excited about around virtual power plants, there are utility companies and energy providers across the nation which are trying to figure out how to balance their own load and mitigate peak demand. And more of them are turning to companies like GoodLeap to, as you saw in one of the press releases and a couple other partnerships that we have in flight, to help manage that. Like we already have these assets, we already have these homeowners, they're sitting on excess energy and can supply that when they great need. Well, now all these utilities can help market that to their entire customer base as well, right? So, and then they get brought in through our app, they get introduced to our ecosystem, and maybe it was solar, maybe it was HVAC, maybe it was windows, maybe it was roofing, right? Anything that's going to help drive a lower cost and a lower carbon and a more sustainable home for themselves. We don't necessarily have to market to them. Like this platform is enabling so much activity that we're getting a pull-through effect through the contractors and utilities and other companies we enable.
Great. So maybe you can even walk us through what a GoodLeap customer experience would be like, like the app, and how does it work?
Yeah, so if you're, there's, like I said, there's two ways to think about how we can add customers. If I'm a contractor and I got a call or I go to someone's home because they have some questions, they want to add it, they're going to use our platform to pull together all that front end origination work, right? So design, proposal, financing, workflow, run it through their system, and sign up that customer for whatever equipment they're buying. The homeowner is going to get a notification from GoodLeap saying, hey, welcome to GoodLeap. We have our customer facing app or our website if that's what you prefer. And at that point, the education begins, right? So here is where you're at in your project's life cycle. You just signed your contracts. Here's what to expect next. We find more often than not, people, some of these things can be long lead time items. And so making sure the customer understands what's going on and feels part of the process is such a critical component in making sure they're happy out of the gate. So just giving them that insight to where they are in their project lives, what they should expect next. And then as that project gets to completion, here's what happens from here. So again, in our app, here is all the statistics of your system, whether it's the HVAC, whether it's the solar, whether it's the battery. Let's track performance together. Let's highlight all the good, all the challenges. Here's a bunch of did you know around other components of your home. I've said things like, I want customers to know what $1 per kilowatt hour is, the same way they know what $1 per gallon of gas is. And if we can complete our goals and we can inform them the way that I believe we will, I think that's a near-term outcome, especially as all these energy and AI and data center demands continue to grow up.
So you're saying, like, talking about like $50 a month for controlling their HVAC system, things like that. How does that work? Like, how does that work with the app? Can you like work with AI, virtual power plants? What's the pathway?
Yeah, so we GoodLeap have connections with, think about like the solar equipment manufacturers, like the Enphases, the SolarEdge, the Teslas, the Franklins of the world. And then we also have connections with a bunch of HVAC units and smart thermostats. And there are many more. Like those are some of the biggest load drivers in the house today, or
Nest
energy
and all that
drivers.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. But then, and as electrification continues to grow, you're going to have more and more of these smart devices. So then there's companies, as you've seen, like Smart Panels and Span, and those that try to aggregate all of that stuff as well. Where, so it's one thing to have all these connections and being able to manage it. It's another thing to do it with the scale that makes these energy companies excited and interested in working with you, right? Like, hey, I can bring you 100 homeowners where you can turn their temperature up or down a degree. That's not necessarily going to move the needle for them. What differentiates us is we have 1 million customers that we serve, and all of them have some levels of thermostats in their home, and then more and more are getting solar and battery systems. So that when we approach some of these energy partners, we're not only bringing them the ability to flick the switch, if you will, so that they can manage their energy, but it's at a scale and level that they need as they think about their overall plan. And then that value that they're willing to pay, because it offsets upgrades, it offsets costly generation they got to go buy, that's also probably dirty in nature. They're more than happy to help compensate us and the homeowners at a level that allows them to eliminate all that time and cost that would be associated with the alternative. So if you're a homeowner, at the end of the day, you're getting a notification like, hey, you're in Texas, and let's say one of the gas plants tripped off and there's been a big spike of energy costs in your area. Hey, let us tap into your system, whatever that energy device may be, and here's the type of compensation that you can expect for doing so. And it's their choice. Like maybe they're like, you know what, I got a bunch of people coming over the house. I got to keep my AC turned up, so I'm not going to participate this time. We'll tell them, hey, this was the opportunity cost that you chose this time, but next time we will also let you know, so that maybe next time, like, hey, for 2 degrees, I'm going to earn $25 for an hour. Like, let's do it, right? And it's that type of feedback loop and education and engagement that we're really hoping to drive over time.
Cool. That sounds good. 2 degrees, $25 for an hour. Just go make yourself a glass of ice water, and there you go. You just do it from the inside. So would you consider GoodLeap a virtual power plant?
I think it's one of the many capabilities that we have. Like I was saying earlier, what I love about our platform is we do a lot of things well, and it's that one-stop shop for that whole experience from the contractor all the way to the homeowner that we can do. So certainly one of our offerings, and that we promote, and you've seen, I think, some press with some deals we've signed, is to be a virtual power plant for whatever location that a lot of our homeowners and assets are in. But like that's not what we do exclusively, right? We seek to be that full software and technology arm for everyone up front, and that is just a nice feature of the overall platform that we have.
Great. So everything from like power purchase agreements to virtual power plants, smart homes, energy management. What am I missing?
Some of the stuff on the front end too, like the design, proposals, you mentioned financing, just bringing, and then the information and the lead generation that comes from having as many homeowners that we have in our ecosystem, and that feedback loop that we get from them on their home, their experiences, and ultimately how to devise better products and services that can be introduced to them and others along the way. So this industry, I think, and really to take off, continues to need to move away from the highly fragmented nature and really develop scale and cost efficiencies. I see GoodLeap at the forefront of that activity, and you got to really have scale, and you have to drive that through technology. And I think the company historically was a finance first, but we've certainly embraced the technology side so that we can evolve and really revolutionize where this industry and hopefully contribute to all the nation's goals around this.
So I see also in some news articles that are not recent or anything like that, or no, perhaps they are more recent, that you're doing stuff with Connecticut Green Bank. And I've actually
Yes.
done a lot of work with them too. So maybe we know some of the same people over there. So what's going on over there in Connecticut?
So that's right up the virtual power plant alley, where the bank has an allocation of funding to help drive costs down through the introduction of battery systems for their homeowners. Traditionally, when you look at the Northeast, yes, you're seeing adoption around solar systems, but battery attachment rates have generally lagged in a lot of that area. And with rising rates and increasing demands and greater blackouts, there's additional pools of capital that have been made available in order to promote battery storage. And so recently, as you mentioned, we partnered with the Connecticut Green Bank to go out to all of our customers existing and then think about all the new customers that we can bring on. And we're doing 90,000 transactions across the nation each quarter right now, not all in Connecticut, but like across the nation. And through these incentives and through these benefits, we can offer what amounts to a no-cost battery to that homeowner, right? So if I'm a homeowner and the value proposition is, hey, in the worst case situation, I'm going to have some backup generation for the key circuits in my home, for the key components that I need to keep my family happy if the power does go out. But in large part, I'm more or less renting out a little bit of space at my house for a big battery so that the larger grid reliability in the system can be better maintained, and I'm going to be compensated for that. So it doesn't really cost me anything up front. People like the Green Bank have that forward-looking vision on, hey, this is ultimately going to reduce costs, not increase costs. So how can we get some capital to do that? And then as you highlight, as rates continue to inevitably climb, these things are going to be worth more and more over time. And now the homeowner knows what's going on, they're engaged, and they're hoping to do more and more over time, which I think is part of the goals of certainly ourselves and the Connecticut Green Bank.
Very great. So you mentioned something about 90,000 transactions. What does that mean?
So on our platform, and in like any given quarter, there are 90,000 different transactions or submissions around people looking for sustainable solutions across the US, right? So we're at 1 million customers plus today, it's growing rapidly. And said in the last quarter, we had 90,000 unique transactions where someone across the nation was looking for solar, battery, HVAC, roofing, windows, doors, whatever sustainability projects and home improvement projects that they were looking for, we are helping to enable it. And that goes back to my comments around scale. And when you have those many transactions and you see this much data, and now I start applying AI and propensity models around all this stuff, it can really lower the cost and help drive the adoption and education people need.
Great. Okay. And would one way that people start getting involved with GoodLeap is to just download your app? Is that like an app that you could find on all the app stores and they can just download it and enter their address and then trying to figure out some good things that they can do?
Yep. Yeah. You don't have to necessarily be a customer today. It's in the Apple Store, it's in Android. You can download the app and then you can start to explore for yourself what's available and what I can do, and start submitting your own questions. I heard on one of your recent podcasts, around people taking pictures and comparing their homes to other homes and maybe finding love. I don't know if we're going to be able to promote that, but we certainly can give you a better perspective on, hey, in your area, in your community, this is the type of results that we see from people's systems in their homes, or here's the upgrades they made. So it's not necessarily fully keeping up with the Joneses. And like I said, I don't know if you're going to find love or compatibility with someone who likes the similar upgrades, but it does give you that education and knowledge so that you can make that decision. And if it does lead to love, then, we'll take that too.
Yeah, I can imagine that you got to add one more function to your app and it would be like a dating thing. And then you find out
that might be that next level.
Carbon compatibility, it's like you want to find somebody that's at home at different times than you are, so you're using more of an even stream of energy, so not using it all at once, so you don't need as many batteries.
That's right, exactly.
So you got there's 3 shifts. There's the kid in school shift, there's going to be the after work shift, and then the middle of the night, the graveyard. So
we'll put it all together.
That's how it's got to work, and it saves on batteries, and it's good for the planet. But yeah, that's kind of funny, and I guess we're probably not going to put the dating app in there. But you never know. You never know where time's going to take us. It's like maybe these, whatever it is, the alpha generation, maybe that'll be their thing. It's like, I'm not going to even date you at all. You're not carbon compatible with me.
Yeah, but we joke, but like going back to what I said there earlier, like this stuff's hard, like it's complex. Like you think about, you're making investments in your home. These are not trivial amounts of dollars that these things cost. Like it's important to know what's going on. It's important to know what other people are doing and making sure that you're not getting left behind or overextending yourself unnecessarily at the same time. So that's a big part of our education campaign and making sure people understand what's out there for them.
So Dan, where does the name GoodLeap come from?
To be honest, I couldn't exactly tell you. So I've been with the company for almost 2 years. It was GoodLeap when I joined. I think it was definitely a different name going forward. I think it speaks to sustainability and prosperity and taking that leap forward as an individual, as an industry, as a country. But unfortunately, I'm not part of the etymology of that name, so I can't give you a better answer.
Yeah, I just have a personal interest because when I graduated from high school, my high school's mascot were the bullfrogs. It was up in Calaveras County where they have a frog jump. And Mark Twain wrote a story about the celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County. And frogs are green, and frogs are good and green. But then I also have a friend whose dad broke one of Jesse Owens's records one time. And Jesse Owens is the guy that was the African-American guy that won a whole bunch of medals.
Yeah, I think the story was a little bit more about like broadening out, into sustainability and doing good for the world.
So let's see, is there any other things that we should cover right now?
I hope this has been informative for all of your listeners. Like I said, I think the industry is in good shape. There's certainly been some ups and downs in riding the coaster, as you highlighted, but I'm confident that one, the policy support and glide path is there. Two, the innovation that is going to be required in order to keep advancing this industry is available, and someone like GoodLeap's helping to drive it. And three, I think homeowners are going to just continue to further adopt and gain knowledge around all these things, sustainability, like energy demand and how AI is impacting all of their lives is growing and becoming more aware. And like that's just going to lead to everyone seeking more solutions around this front. So I'm happy and excited to be part of this industry and hope your listeners love it.
Great. And so how many states are you operating in?
From a solar perspective, doing our third-party owned or PPA lease business, we're in 25 states, but we offer our home efficiency financing in virtually all the states across the U.S.
That's pretty good. And reverse alphabetical order, which states? No, I'm just kidding. We can go to GoodLeap. What's your website?
www.goodleap.com.
So we can go to goodleap.com and figure that out. We can download the GoodLeap app. And where do people find you, Dan Lotano?
They can find me there. They see my name is on the company's executive team. I think there's various ways to contact us as part of that. I'm on LinkedIn. Always interested in hearing people's opinions and thoughts about how we're doing as a company and what we could be doing better both ourselves and as an industry. So welcome any feedback possible. Well,
thank you so much, Dan Lotano. And thanks for listening to Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Go to SolarSEAN, that's SolarSEAN.com, and get yourself NABCEP certified so you can excel in this industry, so you can have the credentials that everyone wants, the NABCEP credentials. Plus, you can contact me there, SolarSEAN.com, if you need any consulting for your companies and all kinds of fun stuff, or just reach out and say hi. You'll see all of the different links on the show notes, like where to get a hold of Dan Lotano, GoodLeap, the GoodLeap app, and SolarSEAN.com. Woo!